The high Exarch Calith stood upon the obsidian bridge of the Sovereign's Mercy, looking out at the pitiful blue marble spinning in the void. From this distance, Earth looked serene, completely unaware that the guillotine blade of the Valari Dominion was currently resting against its neck. Calith smoothed the fabric of his ceremonial robes, his 4 eyes narrowing as he checked the holographic chronometer hovering above the console. They were late. The humans were late. It had been 3 standard rotations since the Dominion fleet had cracked the Sol system's outer defenses, shattering the primitive railgun platforms on Europa and turning the Martian shipyards into molten slag. The blockade was absolute. The message sent to the United Earth government had been simple and non-negotiable. Send a diplomatic shuttle to the flagship. Board the Sovereign's Mercy. Sign the Articles of Subjugation. Or watch as the Dominion's plasma lances turned the atmosphere of Earth into a global incinerator. Subjugation was a kindness, Calith mused. Most species who resisted the Dominion were simply erased. But humanity possessed a certain durability. They were excellent laborers. They adapted to high gravity and low oxygen better than most slave races. They would make fine miners in the asteroid belts of the Proxima sector. Officer Vrek, the sensor technician, chittered nervously from the pit below the command throne. His claws clicked rapidly against the glass interface. Calith looked down, irritated by the noise. He asked what the delay was. The humans had been given a precise window. If their shuttle did not clear the atmosphere within the next 10 microcycles, the bombardment would begin. Vrek hesitated, his antennae twitching. He reported that there was movement. A signal had just breached the cloud layer above the North American continent. Calith exhaled a breath of satisfaction. Finally. Fear had done its work. He imagined the scene down there. Panic in the streets, weeping leaders, a small, trembling shuttle rising on pillars of chemical fire, carrying the broken spirit of a species ready to kneel. He ordered the fleet to hold fire and to prepare the docking bay for a standard Class 4 transport. He wanted the honor guard assembled. He wanted the humans to see the majesty of the Dominion the moment they stepped off their little tin can. But Vrek did not relax. The sensor officer tapped his screen harder, a low growl of confusion rising in his throat. He reported that the energy signature was incorrect. Calith frowned. Incorrect how? Was it a weapon? Vrek shook his head. He said it wasn't a weapon signature. It wasn't a warp core. It was thermal. Massive, inefficient thermal output. It looked like a volcano had just decided to detach itself from the crust and fly into orbit. Calith stepped down from the throne and walked to the main viewport. He expected to see a speck, a tiny glimmer of metal catching the sunlight. Instead, he saw the storm clouds of Earth part. It didn't look like a ship, not at first. It looked like a city block had been ripped from the bedrock, encased in steel, and shoved upward by the hand of an angry god. It rose on a column of fire so wide it was visible from the moon. The sheer amount of chemical propellant being burned was staggering, creating a pillar of smoke that punched through the stratosphere. As it cleared the atmosphere and shed its booster stages, the scale of the object became apparent. It was ugly. It was terrifyingly, wonderfully ugly. There were no elegant curves, no gravity-defying rings, no aesthetic lighting. It was a rectangular slab of dark grey armor, pockmarked with thruster burns and welding scars. It was covered in antennae, heat radiators, and external piping that made it look like an industrial refinery, capable of warp travel. Calith stared. That was not a shuttle. That thing was half the size of the Sovereign's Mercy. He turned to Vrek, demanding an analysis. Vrek's voice trembled. He reported that the mass reading was off the charts. The object was solid density. It wasn't hollowed out for crew quarters or cargo. It was layers upon layers of lead, tungsten, and depleted uranium. It was a flying brick. The human vessel lumbered into high orbit, its maneuvering thrusters firing with violent bursts of gas to kill its momentum. It drifted, rotating slowly until its broadside faced the Dominion fleet. Painted on the side in white letters, scratched and faded but legible, were the words, "Unspoit." Calith squinted. He asked the translator for the meaning. The computer whirred and returned a translation. UNS Spite. Definition: a desire to hurt, annoy, or offend someone. Calith felt a cold ripple move through his blood. He opened a channel to the fleet. He ordered all ships to lock weapons. This was an insult. The humans had sent a garbage scow to mock them. A hail came through the comm system. It was audio only. The signal was analog, filled with static and the crackle of background radiation. It didn't have the crisp clarity of Dominion subspace transmissions. It sounded like a voice coming from inside a storm. The voice was tired. It sounded like a man who hadn't slept in a week, drinking coffee that was more sludge than liquid. "This is Admiral Jack Halloway of the United Earth Navy," the voice rasped. "We received your invitation. Sorry about the delay. It takes a while to get the old girl up to escape velocity. Gravity is a harsh mistress, and she's put on a little weight." Calith signaled for the comms officer to reply. He projected his voice, filling it with the imperious boom that had cowed a dozen star systems. "Admiral," Calith said, "you were instructed to bring a shuttle, a diplomatic transport. Instead, you bring this debris field. Do you intend to surrender, or are you simply wasting the last moments of your species' existence?" There was a pause on the other end, a sound that might have been a chuckle, or perhaps just static. "Well," Halloway replied, "you asked for a representative of Earth to come aboard and sign the treaty. We realized that the treaty is quite heavy, metaphorically speaking. So we brought a vehicle capable of carrying the weight of our decision. This is our shuttle. We just scaled it up." Calith sneered. The arrogance. These primitives thought that because they built something big, it was dangerous. They didn't understand the nuance of shield harmonics or plasma resonance. A big rock was still just a rock. "You are testing my patience, human," Calith warned. "Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you attempt any hostile action, we will vaporize that floating tomb." "Boarding might be difficult," Halloway said, his voice dropping an octave, losing the tired edge and gaining something harder. "You see, we don't really have airlocks compatible with yours. And to be honest, we didn't come here to sign your paper." Calith's hand hovered over the fire control command. "Then why are you here?" "We're here," Halloway said, "because you threatened to burn our home. You told us we were weak. You told us our technology was laughable. And you were right. We don't have plasma shields. We don't have faster-than-light sensors. We don't have gravity manipulation. But we do have one thing." "And what is that?" Calith mocked. "We have mass," Halloway said, "and we have acceleration." Calith didn't have time to process the statement. On the view screen, the ugly, brick-like ship didn't fire a laser. It didn't launch a missile. It didn't release fighters. Instead, the entire front section of the UNS Spite split open. It wasn't a hangar bay. It was a barrel. The human ship wasn't a carrier. It wasn't a battleship in the traditional sense. The entire vessel, all 5 kilometers of its length, was built around a single magnetic acceleration spine. The ship was a flying gun. "Physics check," Halloway's voice crackled over the speakers. A magnetic charge built up along the length of the human ship, a blue ripple of lightning arcing across the hull plates. The energy reading on Rex's console spiked so high, it cracked the screen. "Sir!" Rex screamed. "Magnetic spike! They're firing!" "Shields to maximum!" Calith roared. "Intercept!" The Dominion shields were designed to disperse energy. They could scatter a plasma bolt or absorb the heat of a laser. They worked on the principle of frequency dissipation. But the humans didn't use energy. They used a solid slug of ferric tungsten alloy, the size of a skyscraper, weighing 40,000 tons. The UNS Spite shuddered as it fired. The recoil was so immense that the massive ship was pushed backward, its maneuvering thrusters screaming to compensate. The projectile left the barrel at a fraction of the speed of light. There was no time to dodge. There was no time to think. Sir Isaac Newton is the most deadliest son of a bitch in space. The slug slammed into the void shields of the Sovereign's Mercy. If it had been a laser, the shields would have held. But kinetic energy does not care about frequency. It only cares about transfer. The sheer momentum of the impact shattered the shield emitters instantly, overloading the grid and blowing out power conduits across the entire Dominion flagship. The slug didn't stop. It punched through the ornate golden armor of the bow. It tore through the crew quarters, the mess halls, the hydroponics bays. It cored the Sovereign's Mercy like an apple. The impact was silent in the vacuum, but the vibration rattled Calith's teeth. The floor of the bridge buckled. Alarms screamed, a cacophony of failure. The artificial gravity failed, sending the crew floating into the air amidst a cloud of debris and coolant fluid. Calith grabbed a railing, staring in horror as the main view screen flickered back to life. The Sovereign's Mercy was drifting, listing heavily, a hole punched clean through its center. "Direct hit," Rek whimpered, floating upside down near the ceiling. "Main power is offline. Weapons are dead. Drives are dead. We are dead in the water, Exarch." The comms channel crackled again. "Target impact confirmed," Halloway said. "Sorry about the mess. We're still calibrating the sights. That was a warning shot, by the way. The next one will be aimed at your reactor core." Calith couldn't breathe. A warning shot? They had crippled a Dreadnought with a warning shot. You barbarians," Calith whispered, though the comms likely picked it up. "That is not warfare. That is butchery. You use rocks. You throw rocks." "It's a very fast rock," Halloway corrected, "and it seems to work. Now, about that treaty." The other Dominion ships were reacting now. 3 destroyers broke formation, diving toward the UN Spite. They were sleek, fast, and armed with plasma torpedoes. They would strafe the human brick, cut it apart with precision lasers. "Hostiles inbound," Halloway said, sounding bored again. "Point defense, wake up." Calith watched as the hull of the human ship transformed. Panels slid back. But instead of high-tech turrets, the humans extended thousands of rotary cannons. Old technology. Chemical projectile throwers. As the Dominion destroyers swooped in, the UN Spite erupted in a cloud of lead. It wasn't about accuracy, it was about saturation. They created a wall of metal, a storm of flak so dense that space itself seemed to turn solid. The destroyers flew into the meat grinder. Their shields flickered and died under the millions of impacts per second. Armor was shredded. Engines were choked with debris. The first destroyer spiraled out of control, slamming into the second. The third tried to pull up, but the flak storm chewed its wings off, sending it tumbling into the Earth's atmosphere to burn up. "We call that the Porcupine Protocol," Halloway explained. Effective, isn't it? On the bridge of the ruined flagship, Calith pulled himself toward the communications console. His pride was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of survival. These creatures were insane. They didn't care about elegance or efficiency. They built a hammer, and they saw every problem as a nail. "Cease fire," Calith shouted. "Cease fire! We yield!" The wall of lead from the human ship stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy. "Yield?" Holloway asked. "I thought you wanted us to sign the Articles of Subjugation." "There will be no subjugation," Calith said, his voice shaking. We underestimated your engineering capabilities." "We get that a lot," Holloway said. "We aren't the smartest kids in the galaxy, Exarch. We know that. We haven't figured out how to bend space-time. We can't teleport. But we've been throwing rocks at each other for 10,000 years. We've gotten really, really good at it." Calith looked at the damage report scrolling on his auxiliary screen. The fleet was in disarray. The flagship was a wreck, and the human ship, that monstrosity, was recharging its main gun. The blue lightning was crackling along the barrel again. "What are your terms?" Calith asked. "Leave the Sol system," Holloway said. "Immediately. Leave the wreckage of your ships. We'll use the scrap metal. And tell the rest of your Dominion that Earth is off limits. Tell them that if they come back, we won't bring the spite." Calith swallowed hard. You have others?" "The spite is a prototype," Holloway lied. Or perhaps he wasn't lying. With humans, it was impossible to tell. "We have the malice, the grudge, and the petty revenge, currently under construction. And I hear the petty revenge is going to be twice as big." Calith closed his eyes. He could picture it. A fleet of flying bricks, ugly and hateful, smashing through the elegant armadas of the galaxy simply because they were too stubborn to die. "We accept," Calith said. "We are leaving." "Good choice," Holloway said. "Oh, and Exarch? One more thing." "Yes. Next time you invite us to a meeting, don't ask for a shuttle. We have a tendency to overpack." The connection cut. Calith slumped against the console. He watched as the UNS Spite fired its maneuvering thrusters, turning its massive, scarred flank away from them. It began the slow burn back toward a higher orbit, looking for all the universe like a floating mountain of scrap. But Calith knew better now. It wasn't scrap. It was a monument to the most terrifying force in the universe: human obstinance. He barked orders to the remaining navigators. He wanted to be out of this system before the humans decided to test fire that gun again. As the Sovereign's Mercy limped toward the edge of the system, dragging its wounded hull, Calith made a note in the official log. Entry 47B. The Terran species is not to be engaged in kinetic warfare. They are primitive, crude, and technologically stunted. However, they possess a total disregard for self-preservation and the laws of physics. Do not demand their surrender. Do not threaten their home. And above all, never, ever tell them they are cornered. They do not break. They simply become heavier. Below them, on the bridge of the UNS Spite, Admiral Holloway slumped into his command chair. He rubbed his eyes and looked at his XO, Commander Evans. "Did they buy it?" Holloway asked. Evans checked the long-range sensors. "They're retreating at maximum possible speed, sir. It looks like they're terrified." Holloway let out a long breath. "Thank God." "Sir?" "The main gun fused after that first shot, Evans," Holloway whispered. "The magnetic rails melted. We couldn't have fired a second round if our lives depended on it." Evans grinned. "They didn't know that, sir." No, Holloway smiled, picking up his cold coffee. They didn't. That's the thing about poker, Evans. It's not about the cards you have. It's about the size of the gun you put on the table. And the spite. She held together. Holloway patted the armrest of his chair. She's an ugly beast, but she did her job. Get the repair crews on the rail system. If they come back, I want to be able to fire twice. Aye, sir. Holloway looked out the viewport at the retreating alien stars. He took a sip of the sludge coffee and grimaced. It was terrible. It was bitter. It was full of grounds. It tasted like victory. The humans of Earth went back to work. There were cities to rebuild. There were defenses to construct. And somewhere in the shipyards of orbit, the keel was being laid for the UNS Petty Revenge. And true to Holloway's word, they were making it twice as big. Because if there was one thing humanity had learned, it was that there was no such thing as overkill. There was only open fire, and I need to reload. And humanity was just getting started.